The world below was locked in a perpetual struggle for supremacy, ruled by the gargantuan footprints of the great sauropods and the bone-crushing jaws of the mighty theropods. This was the age of reptiles, yet one group dared to escape the terrestrial battlefield and claim an entirely new dominion. The sky vast, untamed, and demanding a completely revolutionary design. The appearance of the pterosaurs marks one of the most profound leaps in the history of vertebrate life, the mastery of powered flight. Now, let's open the fossil record and resurrect the story of this Jurassic titan. The earliest records, stretching back to the late Triassic, show us creatures already perfected for this aerial existence. They were not simply lizards with wings. They were a distinct, highly specialized branch of the archosaurs, charting a radically different evolutionary course from their dinosaurian cousins. When we analyze the paleobiomechanics of these animals, we find a suite of extraordinary, interdependent adaptations built around the single, non-negotiable requirement of flight: maximum strength at minimum mass. The cornerstone of their ability lay in the unique architecture of their wings. Unlike birds, which evolved flight using feathers supported by the entire forelimb, the pterosaur wing, or patagium, was primarily anchored to one elongated finger, the fourth digit, a structure so modified it seems alien. The other three fingers remain small and clawed, suggesting they were used for walking, climbing, or grasping. But it is the fourth finger that became the true marvel, hyperextended and incredibly robust, providing the structural cantilever that supported the flexible membrane of skin, muscle, and fibrous material that stretched all the way to the ankle. This massive digital extension meant the pterosaur wing had a dynamic geometry radically different from that of a bird or a bat, giving it precise, single-point control over the crucial leading edge. To power this unique system, their skeletal structure had to be almost impossibly light. The bones were not dense. They were pneumatic, permeated by internal air sacs connected to the respiratory system, much like those of modern birds. This wasn't merely a weight-saving measure. It was an integral part of their physiology, likely enhancing respiratory efficiency during strenuous flight. We also see that the torso was reinforced. The notarium, a fused section of the dorsal vertebrae, provided a rigid anchor point for the powerful flight muscles that attach to the keel-like sternum or keel. A flexible, free-moving spine is ideal for terrestrial running, but for generating the powerful downstrokes of flight, a fixed, unmoving anchor is essential. This evidence from the fossil record immediately dismantles a common misconception. The pterosaurs were not clumsy gliders. Their anatomy dictates that they were highly competent, active flyers. The large, deep keel, the pneumatic bones, and the unique wing mechanism all point to a high aspect ratio and powerful locomotion. Their design was purpose-built for sustained, energy-intensive flight, allowing them to soar, pursue prey, and navigate vast distances across the Mesozoic supercontinents. The foundation for flight established, the pterosaurs proceeded to dominate the Mesozoic skies for over 150 million years, an unprecedented evolutionary run that saw them diverge into an astonishing array of forms, each filling a distinct ecological niche. This immense time frame allows us to engage in comparative paleontology that showcases their successful radiation. Broadly, we categorize them into two main suborders: the long-tailed, often smaller Rhamphorhynchoids of the Jurassic, and the short-tailed, more advanced pterodactyloids that rose to prominence in the Cretaceous. The Rhamphorhynchoids, such as the genus Rhamphorhynchus itself, typically possessed a long, rudder-like tail, a feature we interpret as an essential stabilizing element, perhaps indicative of less sophisticated control and less efficient flight at high speeds. These forms often had sharp, interlocking teeth, ideal for snatching fish from the water's surface, a lifestyle that parallels modern pelicans or gulls. When we analyze the fossil record from the Solnhofen-Plattenkalk in Germany, we see beautifully preserved specimens that even retain impressions of the patagium, providing invaluable data on the wing structure and how they might have fished. Their paleoecology seems tied closely to coastal and inland waterways, exploiting the rich aquatic resources of the time. However, the true innovation came with the rise of the pterodactyloids. Free from the constraints of the long tail, these later forms evolved a sophisticated suite of aerodynamic controls. Their wing membranes were not static. The pteroid bone, a unique projection on the wrist, allowed them to adjust the leading edge of the wing, acting like a flexible, movable flap to increase lift at lower speeds, a feature analogous to the slats on a modern aircraft. This biomechanical refinement allowed for the explosive diversification we observe throughout the Cretaceous. Consider the contrast between Pteranodon and the giant Azhdarchids. Pteranodon, with its estimated 18-foot wingspan, was a creature built for oceanic soaring. Its large, bony crest, once popularly believed to be only for display, is now analyzed by researchers to have served a critical aerodynamic function, possibly acting as a stabilizer or counterweight to the massive beak when catching prey at speed. Its streamlined body and enormous wings speak to a life spent riding the thermals over open water, capable of traversing enormous distances with minimal energy expenditure. This adaptation placed it in a marine ecological niche, far removed from the predatory dinosaurs below. Then we come to the Azhdarchids, the true behemoths of the pterosaur lineage, typified by genera like Quetzalcoatlus. This group directly challenges and helps us myth-bust the old image of pterosaurs as frail, fish-eating flyers. With wingspans potentially exceeding 33 feet and estimated heights comparable to a giraffe, Quetzalcoatlus and its relatives were the largest flying animals ever known. Analysis of their extremely long necks, rigid torsos, and robust limbs, coupled with their fossil distribution far inland, strongly suggests they were not primarily fishing pterosaurs. Instead, they appear to have been terrestrial stalkers, apex generalist predators or scavengers, using their long, spear-like jaws to snap up smaller dinosaurs, mammals, or eggs. Their ability to achieve and maintain flight, despite their enormous size, is a testament to the extreme efficiency of the pterosaurian design, likely involving an ingenious ground-launching mechanism, possibly a four-limbed push-off, to get airborne. Their success was predicated on exploiting every possible niche, from the small, insectivorous unraveling with their short faces and wide mouths, to the filter-feeding Ctenochismatids with their hundreds of fine, interlocking teeth, adapted for sieving minute organisms from the water. Through millions of years, the pterosaur body plan remained robustly viable, but the world was changing around them. New competitors were arriving in the skies, bringing with them a different blueprint for flight. The zenith of pterosaurian dominance was not destined to last forever. As the Cretaceous wore on, the fossil record begins to whisper of a shift in the aerial power balance. While the pterosaurs were masters of their design, another group of reptiles, the birds, or aves, were rapidly perfecting their own method of flight. This period is fascinating for the insights it offers into ecological niche competition. Pterosaurs and early birds coexisted for tens of millions of years, but the differences in their skeletal and aerodynamic blueprints ultimately proved decisive. Birds, with their feathered wings and fundamentally different muscle attachment points, were evolving rapidly, particularly into smaller, more agile forms. They effectively began to colonize the smaller-scale aerial niches, the close quarters maneuvering, and dense forest environments that the generally larger pterosaurs were structurally less suited for. When we compare the wing structure, the pterosaur design, while capable of immense size and efficient long-distance flight, may have had biomechanical limitations in terms of rapid maneuverability and complex, low-speed handling when compared to the bird's multi-plane feathered wing. The geological timescale reveals that the smaller and medium-sized pterosaurs began to disappear, a silent, gradual decline where their niches were increasingly filled by the burgeoning avian fauna. This is not the story of immediate, violent extinction, but one of competitive exclusion. The sky was effectively being partitioned, with the smaller, faster, more adaptable birds claiming the lower levels, and the pterosaurs concentrating their evolutionary efforts toward the high end of the size scale, the Azhdarchids. These giants, like Quetzalcoatlus, represent a final, desperate evolutionary strategy. By specializing in enormous size, they may have escaped direct competition with most birds. A wingspan of 10 meters placed them in an entirely different class of flyer, one that only the largest birds today can remotely approach. They held onto their ecological niche as the Mesozoic equivalent of flying giraffes or elephants, large, powerful, and specialized for high-level foraging, scavenging, or the pursuit of substantial prey. They stood as the undisputed aerial heavyweights right up to the very end of the era. But specialization comes at a cost, particularly during times of catastrophic environmental upheaval. When the KPG extinction event arrived 66 million years ago, the highly adapted, geographically widespread, but numerically fewer giant pterosaurs were inherently more vulnerable. Unlike the birds, which had diversified into countless smaller forms with shorter generation times and varied diets, the large pterosaurs had nowhere to retreat. The sheer scale of the global disaster was too great, and the unique legacy they carried, the mastery of flight for 150 million years, came to an abrupt close. The fossil record stops with them, a clear and decisive signature in the rock. The extinction was total. The lineage of the windwalkers was severed completely. The pterosaurs were not dinosaurs, but their parallel history represents the other great success story of the ruling reptiles of the Mesozoic. They show us the incredible plasticity of evolution, adapting a common archosaurian ancestor into a creature of the air using a blueprint fundamentally different from anything that came before or after. Their rise, their radiation into a myriad of specialized forms, and their ultimate extinction offer a profound chapter in the history of life on Earth. The air is now ruled by the descendants of a smaller, different group, but the memory of the first winged vertebrates, the wind riders of the Mesozoic, remains etched in the stone. When we look up at the soaring birds of today, we are witnessing a continuing experiment in flight, one that began long after the first conquerors of the air had vanished. The pterosaurs are a timeless reminder that evolution is not a single path, but a billion experiments occurring simultaneously, each one perfect for its time and place. Their fossils, resting in museums, offer us a tangible connection to a lost world, one where giants walked the earth and even greater giants rode the winds above. We are left only with wonder at the scale and ambition of that vanished life.